All right, everybody, welcome back. I am Matt Monty. This is Wyatt Darby. Thank you so much for sticking with us through the technical difficulties that we had throughout the round there. I think we've got the sound figured out. I mean, we don't have to listen to Joe anymore, so that's like a straight upgrade already, right?
I would like to think so, yeah. I mean, I can probably fill in some background noise if anyone misses it.
Okay.
You know, just chatter in the mic a little bit.
That's good. That's good.
No, I think we're going to be smooth sailing from here.
All right. So Joe and I got done watching Black-Green Eldrazi beat Dimir Inverter, which was one of those decks we expected to see a lot of today. The other one, not so much. This one that we've got lined up for you. It's going to be Will Kruger versus Joe Bernal. Joe, again, our defending MVP from last year. This is kind of more of a I don't know if it's a classic matchup, but this is two of the more pillars of the format currently. So Joe is going to be playing Spirits, and Will is playing the Sultai Traverse deck.
Yeah, you know, both decks that have risen in popularity a lot. You know, Sultai didn't really exist before Theros Beyond Death.
Yep.
Uro was kind of the shot in the arm to give the deck the staying power and closing speed that it needed. And Spirits has really kind of gotten popular kind of as a way to combat the combo decks in the format. You know, really reasonable against Inverter. It's got a solid amount of disruption for Lotus Breach too. So, yeah, sensible choices from two really strong players. And I think this matchup in particular is pretty close. You know, very interactive. Combat actually matters. You know, Ishkanah can get in the way for some things, and I think it should be a pretty good back and forth.
Okay, cool. I see in the chat we've got Bob Taylor hanging out. He says, "Yay, much better." So hopefully we're smooth sailing the rest of the way. So appreciate it again for everybody. We're in Indianapolis, Indiana. We got about 160 players in the room playing some Pioneer today. If you're in the area or thinking about playing some Magic, Modern is tomorrow around the same time also. So be sure to check that out. Sounds like the players are about ready to roll down there. So we're going to get some Magic kicked off here in a couple minutes. Who do you like in this matchup, you think? Which side would you rather be on?
You know, it's really interesting. Sultai has the very wrong side of my deck problem that it can have in any game one. But I do think it has a lot of tools. You know, having access to lots of Fatal Push, Abrupt Decay, Ishkanah. I think I would take Sultai, but interestingly enough, looking at data from the last couple Pro Tours, Spirits actually was probably winning about 60% of the time.
That's
so
interesting.
I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I think it just speaks to exactly how close each individual game can be.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm with you. I'd rather be on the Sultai version. I mean, I actually rode with Will this weekend, and I mentioned him. Your deck's just a Jund deck. It's kind of what it feels like. It's a point-and-click deck. It has some customizability, which is nice, though. You can see Jace is making an appearance. A card I'm not sure if he's playing, the Liliana, the Last Hope, is really, really good against Spirits. So we'll see what he's got as we get the deck list here. But they're going to get ready to roll, and we'll bring you game number one from these two guys. And no strangers to the feature match area, either one of these guys. So. Yeah. You might know Will a little bit better as X-Whale, I believe is his MTGO name. He is the Modern Trophy Leader, so but he does play a decent amount of Pioneer as well. So.
And also, I think Trophy Leader with Eldrazi Tron, which actually makes it about 3 times more, I think, notable.
Yeah. All right, so Will leads off on Fabled Passage there. Joe shucks in a Hallowed Fountain, and Mausoleum Wanderer is the first play there for Joe.
Yeah, pretty critical, much better at applying pressure than the other one-drop Spectral Sailor. And this can be, critical in presenting a kill that's, closer to a turn 5 lethal than a turn 7. As good as Spirits can be at playing the later game, it really does want to be the one who, puts their best foot forward and tries to apply some pressure. Yeah,
so Will's going to go ahead and fetch out an island here. Mausoleum Wanderer is such a, innocuous card. It's like, all right, well, this stupid 1/1's not going to kill me, but it's really annoying to play against, and it also just kind of grows as the turns go, So it's a jack of all trades and a decent one-drop to add to these decks.
Yeah, a lot of the time it hits about as hard as Delver of Secrets does, while making some spells just kind of flat out uncastable.
Sure.
And really important to add kind of layers of protection for your more important expensive spirits, the Spell Quellers and Eagles of the World.
Yep, so we're going to go ahead and Thought Erasure here. And let's see what Joe's got. Looks like there's a Rattle Chains.
And a one-lander, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And Joe was playing first. We actually fired off the keep 7-card hand with this. And kind of interesting, one land off the top allows Rattle Chains and Phantom to get played.
Yeah.
We might have had some information, knowing that Will was playing a blue deck so that Mystical Dispute's live and castable. But, because the Wanderer got played, no dispute available this turn, and Will has perfect knowledge to sculpt this game plan.
Yeah, it looks like there's 2 of the Eagles hanging out there. They're going to be tough to get around. Will's going to go ahead and take the Supreme Phantom there, and then, Man, I think there might have been a Mystical Dispute hanging out in Joe's hand too, which is not going to play too well in this game. So Will down to 18 as well. And he gets to use the Surveil ability from that Thought Erasure. Will's hand, I think he has he's got an Abrupt Decay in there. I think there's an Uro. He's got a lot of tools here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to try and do your best to make sure you can bring that Uro back on turn 4. It's kind of, and it'll land very timely for Joe. But it's hard to rely on Uro too much for your game plan when you know that whenever you try and escape it, there can be a dispute waiting pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so Joe going to play that Glacial Fortress untapped and stick to Mausoleum Wanderer. Again, he has Rattle Chains at the ready. That's what Will goes for. Will looks like he's got a third land wrapped up. So he's going to go ahead and shock down to 15. All right, and there's a Thoughtseize there. And Joe going to go ahead and take the time to stick that Rattle Chains down. All right. And this Thoughtseize is going to resolve. It's going to take one of the Eagles there.
I mean, with the way this is kind of breaking out, Will's mana base has been kind of painful this game. And, an Eagle coming down this turn, if Joe can rip the second consecutive lands, is actually pretty rough. Will has a little bit of removal, but it's kind of hard to keep pace with the Spirit getting played every turn when you can kind of only kill, one thing at a time. So,
yeah. All right, so Joe coming in for 3, putting Will down to 10. Heads up play by Will as well to not get his Jace Mystical Disputed. He went for the Thoughtseize first. And was able to just kind of take a peek and forced Joe to play that Rattle Chains if he wanted to get it into play. So, all right, we're going to activate that Jace, Vryn's Prodigy. So a card, it saw a ton of play in Standard. So he's going to draw a card and discard a card, and actually he's going to flip that Jace right away here on his 4th turn.
Yeah, a lot of optionality. Right now, Jace plussing every turn is going to be not exactly a removal spell, but functioning very close. Yeah. And kind of, just the interaction he needs. It's going to, allow him to play closer to 2 removal spells a turn. And there is an Abrupt Decay in Will's hand, so that can double down as actual hard removal here, kind of as soon as next turn.
Yeah, I really like where Will's position here, so he's going to go ahead. So he's going to go ahead and plus that Jace. So Jace the Telepath Unbound here. So you see Jace Vryn's Prodigy, the first part. Will's going to go ahead and fire off an Abrupt Decay in the meantime here. So you see Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Will was able to tap it, draw a card, and then discard a card. And then he's able to flip it into this Jace Telepath Unbound here, which he's decided to plus. So up to 1 target creature gets -2, -0 until your next turn. It's pretty powerful against a 1 creature on the board for Joe here. And then you mentioned a removal spell every turn, so that -3, he gets to essentially flashback cards from his graveyard. So pretty powerful stuff, especially with this Abrupt Decay, can't be countered.
Yeah, and part of the reason we didn't see a ton of it in Pioneer was the big blue deck for a long time was Blue Light Control, which didn't really play at the kind of tap-out pace that Jace really asks you to do.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of, tentatively trying this Uro. He knows that there's a dispute that could hit it, but, the first kind of explore side isn't particularly relevant in a lot of ways. Yeah. And, Joe has some 3-drops that he's really interested in unloading first, with the Eagle, or I think there was a Nebelgast Herald in hand too. So it looks like Joe's kind of valuing the flexibility to advance his board over, denying Will a redraw and some life here.
Wow, Joe, yeah. Joe chooses to let that go, which is good. And Rattle Chains is a sweet one, and it allows all your other spirits to have flash, which is pretty important for Joe to play out here against Will's removal spells, especially with that Jace on the table.
Yeah, it kind of allows you to sort of hide the telegraphing of cards like Spell Queller, Collected Company if you're playing that. Kind of, it makes your opponent's life sort of miserable. It just Rattle Chains existing makes Sorcery Speed removal kind of a nightmare. Because if I play a Murderous Rider and you have it, the Rattle Chains, that is, it's just kind of a huge swing.
Yeah, it feels really bad. So looks like we're at Will's end step here, and Joe just kind of deciding what he wants to do. Going to go ahead and play that Herald, as you mentioned. All right, going to untap. And I mean, Will's down to 13, so he's not in. He's in danger here. All right, see what Joe decides to do. Both these players one off to a good start so far. Nebelgast Herald going to attack this Jace here for 2. That Rattle Chains is being held back by Jace.
Yeah, still a tough spot for Joe. Killing Jace and killing Will is actually these things are not that much more difficult than each other. So, looks like discard spell number 3 gonna potentially force Joe's hand. Tapping tapping out for an Eagle is fine here, but looks like he'd rather have the optionality for Spectral Sailor and a counterspell because the threat of Uro being escaped this turn is very much real if Will's last card is a blue source.
Definitely. So Joe's hand, as you mentioned there, partner, has an Empyrean Eagle. He has the Spectral Sailor and that Mystical Dispute. Joe's on just mono 4-ofs in his deck, basically, except for the Sailor's a 2-of. So Sailor's pretty good. It's a fine turn 1 play, and it's also great in the late game. Gets to draw more cards, gas you back up after, especially a matchup like this where it's attrition based. So we're going to choose to take the Empyrean Eagle there, and then going to go, looks like backwards on that Jace. You know, Thoughtseize again, down to 9. And looks like he's probably going to take. I'd be shocked if he doesn't take that Dispute. Yeah, so takes the Dispute.
Yeah, pretty interesting. That was actually.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, Scavenging Ooze is perfect to recoup that life, because that was kind of a 4 life cost Thoughtseize, you know, being able to, well, pay the 2 to cast it, and also just Rattle Chains can actually deal some damage for a turn cycle.
Yep.
So, yeah, that kind of opens the door a little bit. Right now, if Joe has another pump effect, he's actually only dealing 8 damage. Yep. So, yeah, kind of a calculated risk from Will, but looks like he's going to be able to untap and...
Yeah.
And Ooze can do some real work here.
Yeah, Scavenging Ooze currently has 3 targets in Joe's graveyard at least. And then, man, he's in, So it looks like Joe going to get that Jace off the battlefield. Again, another target for Scavenging Ooze here. But again, Joe's empty-handed. He does have 4 mana available for the Spectral Sailor. But Will's going to be able to escape that Uro, as you mentioned, if he so chooses this turn. I think he has a second blue source.
Those might actually be 4 Golgari lands in an island even.
Okay.
So, yeah, the mana in Sultai definitely okay, but, yeah, not always stellar.
All right, well, he's going to go ahead and eat 3 creatures from Joe's graveyard to pump up that Scavenging Ooze. Maybe Will's going to start to race here. Not a race. It looks like he's particularly equipped to win, but comes in for 6, so Joe's down to 10.
And, you know, I think in a lot of ways Spectral Sailor is kind of a concession to Curve. You know, you really want it to be able to make your Lord effects better just having more creatures on the battlefield.
Yeah.
But here we can see kind of the other dimension. It just takes over these long games, actually feeding up Joe a Collected Company here as well. So, yeah, Joe is not short on gas. And here we do see the 1/1 Spirit Pirate. It's a flash flyer, and for 4 mana you can draw a card. So a little bit expensive on rate. But I just think that the dimension it adds to your deck is pretty fantastic and kind of hard to get from the rest of the spirits.
Yeah, it man, that Scavenging should be on 5, I believe. 5 counters, not 6. 7? I think it should be at 5 total. I could be wrong. There we go. They figured it out. Okay. It's kind of interesting. So Joe has that Spectral Sailor available. But I believe he drew a Collected Company for the turn. So Will might walk into this one, which would be...
yeah, you know, it's pretty tough not to, because Will's already in a pretty miserable position. And, like, you know, sometimes you kind of have to acknowledge, you know, my opponent can't really have anything for the rest of the game for me to win. And Will probably has to think, you know, the best case is we're just seeing another Spectral Sailor activation this turn, and I'm going to have to play pretty aggressive with the Scavenging Ooze to have any chance. But the combination of Nebulous Herald and Rattle Chains means any spirit coming from anywhere stops the Ooze from really effectively racing.
Right. All right, so these guys look like they're getting a life total update here. And Joe going to go ahead and go for that Collected Company.
Yeah, likely pre-combat, trying to, you know, hit a spirit to tap the Ooze down for an extra turn cycle. But that's a lot of lands off that company.
So you hit 2. There's a Herald and a Mausoleum Wanderer. We're going to go ahead and cast another Uro. Draw a card. All right. There's an Ishkana, but it might be too late to the party at this point.
Yeah, Fatal Push can try and take down the Empyrean Eagle, but Mausoleum Wanderer capable of blocking it, being 2 power right now, and 1 extra life from Scavenging Ooze. I don't think would be enough to carry Will through the turn, but he did gain an extra 3 from that Uro, so if he's at 10, facing down 5, 6, 7, by my count, I think that might be exactly even through 1 Ooze activation.
Yeah. Does Joe have, let's see, he's counted up. Yeah, so Bream Phantom's definitely going to do it. So Joe Bernal going to take game number 1 over Will Kruger. Yeah, he drew the Ishkanah just a little bit too late and was never able to escape that first Uro. Ended up playing a second one, just not enough. So Joe Bernal up a game here. I'm going to take a peek at their sideboards. So I am looking at Joe's sideboards. He's got 2 Rest in Peace, 3 Disdainful Stroke, 4 Seal Away, 4 Deputy Detention, and 2 Ether Gust. There's a lot to like here, honestly.
Yeah, Rest in Peace kind of turns a lot of Will's cards from game-ending whammies to kind of non-functioning.
Yeah.
So that seems pretty powerful. It's tough giving up pressure to play that. A card like Remorseful Cleric is actually pretty similar in functionality and lets you attack a little bit, but Rest in Peace still strong. Disdainful Stroke, a lot of the high-impact cards are taggable by that.
Yeah.
And beyond that, Aether Gust kind of hits a lot of the stuff that matters here too. So yeah,
Sure.
Any combination of those cards would make sense to me.
Definitely. Yeah, he's got a lot of good ones. I'm trying to think of what he would remove. Spellqueller's kind of a liability in this matchup. It's okay. It gets around things like Abrupt Decay, but they just have more removal. They just remove it anyways, and it's kind of a liability. I don't know how many he'll cut. Mystical Dispute is also one that kind of comes to mind. That's not great, but it's serviceable. So.
Yeah, has some targets, but you kind of want to be a little bit more efficient. You're casting it for 3 mana. Kind of a lot against these Sultai decks. They seem to be kind of base black-green with a little bit of blue mixed in. And here we see a little bit more of a diverse sideboard from Will.
Yeah.
2 copies of Damping Sphere to go with 1 Noxious Grasp, 1 Ultimate Price, 3 Mystical Disputes, another Theros Beyond Death card, 1 Farika's Libation, Reclamation Sage, Vivian Reed, as well as 3 Leyline of the Voids and 2 Languish.
Okay.
And yeah, lots of big upgrades here from Will. Mystical Dispute, actually fantastic against the Spirits deck. Kind of a removal spell that can also hit Collected Company is just perfect.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good ones here. Languish is one that stands out as just a decent sweeper. There's so many cards here. Even Ultimate Price is pretty good against this deck in general. Freaka's Libation's interesting. I don't know if 3 mana Diabolic Edict is where you want to be in the matchup, but it's one of those close ones. If you need more removal, which he might, it's definitely a card you can go to.
Yeah, and the flexibility to have another way to kill Rest in Peace can matter in some of these games. And yeah, one thing about Languish that I'd like to point out, it has some susceptibility to Lords being able to outgrow it, but you also can't save it with Spectrals or with Selfless Spirit.
Right.
You can't kind of insulate yourself from the sweeper, and that's going to make it really difficult for Joe to navigate. Not extending too much, and even just expecting the Languish is something that I'm not sure he'll really respect.
Yeah, it's tough. And again, I think Joe and I actually had a conversation about it. Joe Lissette and we were talking about the flexibility of the sideboards and making sure that you're able to beat the combo decks and having a lot of cards for that. Spirits is obviously a very good deck, but do you think that your opponent's going to have sweepers in their board? They have room for that when they want to be able to beat the other decks that are more relevant in the format. It's hard to say yes, and as you mentioned, Joe might just overextend into it, and it's hard. It's hard not to sometimes because you play so many Lords. It's like, well, I need this to be on the field for my deck to function the way it's supposed to function.
Yeah, if I sandbag this 1/3 and get swept, well, the 1/3 is not winning me the game afterwards.
Right.
Yeah, so it's definitely a tough thing for Joe, but I think he's one of the strongest players in the field, so I'm interested to see how we'll navigate it, and we'll see if we can get down to the board here if our players are ready. It looks like they're still shuffling up, but yeah, I think that was an interesting game. I think Will had actually kind of a big window where if he could have escaped the Uro, it would have had enough, turns to gain life. And yeah, I think it just really all came down to, just one breeding pool. Yep. Was really all he needed.
Yeah, he needed that. Yeah, and he would have had a giant Scavenging Goose plus the Uro to really put the pressure on Joe. Joe might have had to leave some things back to block. It would have been definitely a different game there. So these players getting ready. So we're ready to roll for game number 2. I think Joe sounds like he's taking a mulligan here. But Will's happy with his 7. I feel like this Bant Spirits deck doesn't mulligan a ton. I mean, we saw Joe kept a 1-lander and gets paid off, but it's just like a bunch of creatures. It's pretty redundant, the deck. Every card kind of does the same. I mean, they do different things, but they're all just spirits, and you just want to keep like a mass, a critical mass of cards, I think, especially in a matchup like this.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point to highlight why this deck is good against the Thoughtseizes that Wills brings. The cards aren't exactly the same. Things like Spellqueller add some unique effects, but yeah, it's kind of stacking bodies, and you don't really want to go down too low. I think in the world of London Mulligan, the first one tends to be not quite free, but kind of close. And beyond that, though, you are kind of risking exposing yourself to making those discard spells that otherwise would be kind of medium into actual real problems.
Yeah. All right, so Joe's hand looks a lot better here. Gonna go ahead and get rid of one of these cards. Got a couple lands hanging out. Looks like got a good mix of things. So we're gonna lead on Overgrown Tomb and send it back Joe's way.
Yeah, nice little 1-2-3 curve, I think, with Spectral Sailor, Selfless Spirit, and Spell Queller. And, getting rid of Nebelgast Herald because that's one of those cards that you kind of want it when the race has started, but in terms of adding pressure to the battlefield, not particularly efficient.
Sure. Joe shocks in this breeding pool, which makes me think that he probably has Mystical Dispute and wants to stop a potential Jace. Will going to go ahead and go for Traverse Uvenwald and grab an island out of his deck here. Traverse is another sweet card that's kind of seeing more play, so we're going to put Blooming Marsh in play here. And there's Spectral Sailor. All right. All right, so Joe. Go ahead and smack Will for 1 there. So Will down to 19. And there's a Selfless Spirit. So looks like with that on the stack. All right, so Will's just going to go ahead and take out the Selfless Spirit.
Yeah, interesting. Will, he had both Mystical Dispute and Fatal Push in hand. Here we see a devastating Liliana catching Joe without any Lords in play and several 1-toughness creatures, actually drawing another one with Rattle Chains.
Yeah.
But yeah, Will kind of decided to hide the counterspell, and we'll see if we can actually use that lack of information to tag a more relevant spell from Joe here later.
Yeah, I mentioned Liliana last hope when you and I were talking about the sideboarding and a pregame, I believe even. And this card is just a complete beating against these Spirit decks. For 3 mana, you see it starts at 3 loyalty. The +1, which we'll just use up to 1 target creature, is -2, -1. So not only does it nerf a bunch of the Spirits, it actually kills several inside of Joe's deck. The -2 is interesting. It's able to fuel like Uro and things like that. You put the top 2 cards of your library into the graveyard, and you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And then the -7 is just pretty much the game ends on the spot. So it makes tons of zombies. It's nice. It's a control card, and it also is just a nice. The ultimate obviously is a game-winning line for Will. So.
Yeah, and here we see Will kind of shredding Joe this game. The Spell Queller met that Mystical Dispute, stranding Joe with only the Rattle Chains that currently not capable of really adding anything meaningful to the battlefield. And, Will playing Uro, which is really close to escaping, but again, it's just kind of an issue of lands, both quantity and color this time.
Yeah. So he has a Fabled Passage hanging out there. Let's see, how many islands does he have in his deck? It's like 2, so the requisite number for something like that.
Yeah, I've seen some people get a little bit greedy and play something like Ipnu Rivulet instead of a second island to kind of get the inverter decks, but there are, I think, enough situations where the Uro can get stranded that's, you're definitely paying a real price for it.
Okay. Oh, it's a Grizzly Salvage hanging out there, I think is what that one is, actually. Here comes a Rattle Chains for Joe. And he has a second one? All right.
Oh, not bad. This is going to take a pretty large chunk out of Liliana's loyalty, and if Joe can find a Lord here... And yeah, looks like a whiff, but yeah, a Lord there kind of would have just turned Liliana into a card that doesn't really do much for the rest of the game.
Yeah. So you see there's a Walking Ballista. Well, that one's also very good against Joe's Spirit's deck, believe it or not. So, wow, Rattle Chains again, third one, but Will's able to take those down with Walking Ballista. So.
These creatures are kind of rentals at this point. You can see how quickly they're getting mopped up, and Will kind of aggressively taking it down into the Rattle Chains to maintain his Liliana in play, just kind of betting on that doing a little bit more work in the long term.
Yeah. This Liliana, I think, has killed 4 creatures this game. It's it's definitely pulled its weight, I would say. And Will's going to go ahead and Thought Erasure Joe, and Will's on his way to. Escaping this Uro the very next turn here. So this one looks like it's all but over here. Unless Joe rips like a Collected Companies. Going to be one he's going to need here. And we'll get to untap with this Jace active. He's got tons of cards in the bin. So that baby's going to flip.
Yeah, one interesting thing you can do with Uro is actually kind of manipulate whether you want your Jace to flip or not.
Yeah.
And here we see, Will has lots of very powerful cards in the graveyard, a couple removal spells. So opting to start by, transforming the Jace, kind of give himself maximum flexibility moving forward.
Yeah. And there's the Collected Company there for Joe in response to this Uro. Probably looking for a Spell Queller here. I think this Jace should be flipped. Is that optional for the Jace to flip? Do you know?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I think the Jace, we'll get it checked out from our spotter, but yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're going to check it out right now. Yeah, and so Joe, you can see, is going to call a judge over. I don't think it's optional, but I mean, I could be wrong. I would be surprised if a looting effect is optional to like abuse and keep using over and over.
Yeah, I might be wrong, but I think transforming is kind of the last step of the looting.
Yeah.
So if you do the looting, I don't think.
Yeah, let's see. So draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 5 or more cards, which there were, you exile Jace. Yeah, it doesn't say you may, so it's definitely gonna be a transformed Jace. So we'll get this all cleaned up for you. Just a small mistake. Will was kind of rushing through to escape his Uro as well as use the Jace ability. So.
Yeah, and having 2 Planeswalkers up really mitigates the value of this Collected Company.
Yep.
Unless the card Spell Queller gets hit to stop the Uro, any other creatures are going to be pretty effectively nullified by, the Jace plus and the Liliana plus in conjunction.
Yep. All right, so let's check out Uro. So Uro's a new card here from Theros Beyond Death. This card was pretty widely accepted as a busted Magic card when it was previewed. You see Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath there for 3 mana. It's Legendary Elder Giant. When it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice it unless it escaped. So the escape mechanic I'll read in the bottom there is green, green, blue, blue. So in order to do that, you exile 5 other cards from your graveyard, and then the card is cast. So whenever Uro enters the battlefield or attacks, you gain 3 life, draw a card, and you can put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Pretty powerful card.
Yeah, it just does everything. Like, this card is such a critical piece to making sure your aggro matchups are great, but even still, if you're playing against this lower deck, it just constantly feeds you so much action. And here we see Will probably fetching up for an Abrupt Decay in hand, firing that off on the Eagle, and
jeez. Yeah, so that one does not die because of the it was a 2/2 at the time, I believe, and now it's going to die. And Joe says, I had enough. I had enough of this Liliana. Liliana, I believe, killed 5 or 6 creatures that turn. It was pretty devastating to Joe's overall game plan. So, now how many does Will have? Just the one in there?
Yeah, just one Liliana. The deck doesn't go too hard on it. It's just kind of, when you're playing a Traverse deck, you do want to have a little bit of each different, card type that you can to kind of facilitate some consistency there. And, sometimes those one-ofs just dominate games.
Yeah.
And that was the story of Liliana, and actually just a perfectly fine hand by Joe, but it just got shredded.
Yeah, I thought Joe's hand was fine, as you mentioned there. He had a 1-drop. He curved out rather nicely, I thought. And he actually had, like, that turn of double Rattle Chains I thought was going to be really good. I was like, okay, well, if he hits a Spirit, another Lord here, or if he hits a Collected Company, he's going to be in good shape. Never came to fruition. So, at any rate, let's take a look at the sideboards again, see if anything's going to change up. So now I was thinking about Rest in Peace against, like, Traverse and Ishkana and things like that. Definitely gains a lot more stock when you're against, like, Uro, obviously, and these Jace Vryn's Prodigies. I think that's definitely Rest in Peace is almost certainly in his deck post-board.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. You almost have to find cards that don't get tagged by it in some way. And the biggest thing is just making sure you don't sacrifice pressure too much.
Yeah.
Because, it's not like Sultai can't answer it. They do have a couple copies of Abrupt Decay, potentially some sideboard cards that can do it, like the Libation we mentioned briefly.
Yep.
I think that's definitely probably the most powerful thing that Joe can play, but has to be careful not to keep a hand that plays Rest in Peace on turn 2 and then like a 2/3 on turn 3. That can still end up being too underwhelming.
Yeah. He definitely doesn't want to dilute his deck too much. I just like thinking about it. I mean, again, Joe's deck cooperated nicely. Will's deck post sideboard is just equipped a lot better to deal with whatever Joe's up to. I mean, we didn't even see a Languish, but you mentioned the powerful Planeswalker took over. Both Planeswalkers were going to take over the game eventually. So, going to be tough sledding here for Joe. Obviously, he gets to be on the play here for game number 3, so things can change a little bit. I would say Rattle Chains and Selfless Spirit are 2 of the bigger, the 2-drops are very important for him to get going. And he needs Will to have kind of a slower hand. It's not as loaded with Planeswalkers.
Yeah, having access to turn 1 Mausoleum Wanderer can be pretty big. Again, making the game just end a little bit faster, making some of the clunkier removal spells in Will's deck, the Murderous Riders of the world, just kind of non-functional in the face of that light disruption is going to be important. And, I think, like a lot of these games with Spirits, Collected Company can bail you out of spots that no other card can. So that's definitely one that Joe's going to be very keen to find. And, it looks like starting this 3rd game, Will is on a mulligan. And, that's one of those things where Sultai has to look for a lot of things just to function. I need the 3 colors of mana.
Yeah.
And every mulligan you take, you really do have to sacrifice some layer of interactivity. Or, like we saw in game 1, a lot of interactions beatable if there's no big threat behind it.
Yeah, his hands, when he wants to draw more cards, his cards are like Liliana is virtual card advantage, Jace is virtual card advantage, sometimes actual card advantage. But yeah, he needs those cards in order to come back from mulligans. Obviously, Uro's a big one too. So we're going to go down to 18 here with this Watery Grave, and Joe does not have a turn 1 play. Will looks like going to lead off on nothing. Okay, so likely Fatal Push hanging out in hand, and Joe's going to be keenly aware of that one.
Yeah, Fatal Push and Mystical Dispute kind of both ring some alarm bells here. And, one thing about it is if it's Fatal Push, Will also has to need 2 mana on the following turn to be willing to not just like play the land tapped and use that extra mana later. So here we see Jace getting cast, and there's definitely lots of disputes in Joe's deck, and one tags it right away.
Okay. Followed by Spectral Sailor also, so that's pretty good turn. He basically didn't have to take a turn off in order to do that, which is nice for him. So Joe going to go ahead and stick Supreme Phantom and Mausoleum Wanderer, and Will's under the gun.
Yeah, and this is great. Joe has the efficient beatdown end of his deck with, I think, another Supreme Phantom in hand. So this is a situation where Will might only get 2 more turns before he's, facing down lethal.
Okay. Mausoleum Wanderer is also very interesting against, we have been talking about this Languish for a while. You can't cast it on turn 4. Well, you can, but it's going to get countered by Mausoleum Wanderer. So another annoying piece of the puzzle for Joe's deck against these removal heavy decks.
Yeah, and Will kind of thinking, understandably pretty heavily about this turn, because this is kind of where things are gonna swing pretty heavily. If all he can do is play an Uro and a tap land, that's a little bit slow on the development front. But if there's removal spells, that's kind of just treading water. Here we actually see a Noxious Grasp currently unable to find any targets, which is it speaks a lot to how much the card Spellcaller has to be respected. That kind of narrow-ish removal spell still does come in.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so Will he's got Thought Erasure, but that's pretty late to the party nowadays, and I mean, man, that's tough sledding here for Will. All right, so going to go ahead and lead with that Thought Erasure. Joe has options. He's going to go ahead and flip him over. So the Wanderer is a 2/2 due to the Supreme Phantom, but he's going to go ahead and let Will pick. And Will's going to take the other Supreme Phantom. There's a Selfless Spirit as the last card in Joe's hand. Will's land's not quite cooperating with him there, as he has that Fatal Push hanging out in hand, but does not have an additional swamp.
Yeah, it's kind of a desperation part of the game when you're getting rid of Fatal Push against the tribal creature deck. Just the mana is, again, it's functional, but it's not. It's really kind of costing Will a lot here. And taking a turn off impacting the battlefield to cast a discard spell, I think mostly motivated by the desire to find just a second black source. Yeah, and
you mentioned the Noxious Grasp that Will does have, so he left that Selfless Spirit in there. Obviously, it's better, gives him more turns because there's not a Lord effect. He also has a removal spell that only has that one target that's in Joe's hand currently. So Joe's going to do some thinking here. Decide how he wants to play out his main phase, whether he wants to deploy another Spirit and pump that Mausoleum Wanderer, or he wants to just kind of hang out.
Yeah, and Joe found land number 4. So, Spectral Sailor's activation, which did a lot of work in Game 1, is kind of back on the table.
Yeah.
And looking at how the math breaks down, right now we're threatening 6 points of damage. The Selfless Spirit makes it 7 with 10 on board. So either way, he's going to be a little bit short of setting up a 2-turn lethal.
So Joe probably run through those numbers that you just mentioned in his head now, partner. So, yeah, Joe's going to do some thinking. All right, so he's going to actually decide to go ahead and drop this Selfless Spirit down. Pumps the Wanderer. It's a pretty healthy attack. So, Will takes a decent-sized chunk. There's a Jason Rin's Prodigy. That is it's an interesting one here as well.
Yeah, it's a card you can cast while also Fatal Pushing.
Yeah.
So while not the land that Will really wanted, it's like probably an above-average draw, all things considered in this position.
Yeah. All right, here comes. Let's see what Will's got. I assume it's going to be this Fatal Push. And he goes after the Mausoleum Wanderer. Card is quite annoying.
Yeah, it's tough. He really doesn't want Joe to sacrifice the Selfless Spirit because then his Noxious Grasp is back to being dead.
Yeah.
But it's kind of impossible to not give Joe that option.
Yeah. So Joe's going to go ahead and, ooh, looks like he was thinking about letting it go. Mausoleum Wanderer is better against like fourth land Languish, but again, that might not be on Joe's radar here. So he's kind of deciding what he wants to do here.
Yeah, and lots of factors. Selfless Spirit, extra point of power on board, but
Yes.
Wanderer can catch that up with any Spirit off the top.
Yeah. So Joe lets it go. Okay, so that happens. Here comes this Jace Vryn's Prodigy, it looks like. So that's going to stick.
And not a huge deal, but, good on Will to make sure, put Joe to that test without giving him information about what the rest of your turn is.
Yeah, definitely.
It's something that can be overlooked, but I think a real important part of good technical play. And, yeah, it looks like a...
6 for 5, right?
Yeah, swing for, I think, 6 with
6,
the
okay.
Yep, Phantom. And, Joe bricked, but thanks to Spectral Sailor, his turn is capped at getting 1 free card, so not too bad. And here we actually see Will finding another land, which is, critical land 4 and maybe another black source.
Yeah, the Fabled Passage is pretty good. So Will thinking about his discard here for that Jace. That was a pretty big draw. So Will's down to 4, as you mentioned. And, wow, that's pretty good. So you're going to go ahead and bin Uro. Going to flip Jace. I honestly think Will's starting to turn the corner here. We'll see. It's going to be close. It's going to take one more turn. Joe does have 2 draws at another Lord because he has the that Selfless Spirit's going to go down. So he has the Spectral Sailor available to draw a card.
Yeah, and as it is, I suspect Jace is going to plus here. Removal spells aren't really live this turn with the Selfless Spirit being sacrificed.
Right.
But, Joe's going to be 3 points short of lethal, and there's not really any 1 card, that can make that happen.
Yeah.
So, depending on how good the Spectral Sailor draws are, I think it's really going to be the crux of this particular game.
Yeah. So Will lets him draw a card. I think he has Abrupt Decay in hand, actually.
Oh,
he sure
that's
does.
huge, yeah.
Wow. That is humongous. So, yeah, Will's in pretty good shape. And there's a Spell Queller, too, right off the top. That hurts. That certainly does not feel good. So, Spell Queller in hand for Joe. Doesn't attack with Spectral Sailor as it's nerfed by that Jace. Telepath Unbound. And Will's probably going to try and escape this Uro, but it's going to get quelled if he goes for that. Huh.
Yeah, it's tough for Will. Right now he's definitely hanging on by a thread, but if you give Joe enough time, Spirits can absolutely draw out of it, especially with 2 cards per turn.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a calculated but probably worthwhile risk here from Will if he ends up going down that route.
All right, here comes, looks like Traverse the Ulvenwald is the card in Will's hand. So we're going to Traverse. I would be surprised if he doesn't have Delirium at this point. He's got Creature, Land, Instant Sorcery. Yeah, I think he's got it.
Yeah, an interesting thing from Joe, firing off Spell Queller right now is tough because if Will grabs a card like Ishkana, well, Spell Queller dies, but, if Will doesn't have land 5, then you kind of want to hit whatever gets found. So
Yeah. All right, so Joe says, you know what, let's stop this now. So Spell Queller's the Traverse. Will does look like he has a land in hand. Play it and pass.
Yeah, we actually see the Swamp blocking Escape from Uro.
Yeah.
And, that kind of makes this turn a lot more difficult for Will. Being able to use Traverse as a bait spell, fantastic. Being able to use Traverse, get it quellered, and say go is much more tenuous.
Yeah. So Joe going to go ahead and draw with Spectral Sailor. Hits double land, I believe. So Will down to 2. Will does have he does have that available. There's a Languish off the top. Wow, that's good. All right, so Languish off the top for Will. He's going to go ahead and cast this Traverse. I would assume Ishkana is the play. There's no real reach for Joe's deck as far as fireball effects, so I don't think he needs to go get Scavenging Ooze or anything like that. And goes and gets Ishkana, pluses up that Jace. Spectral Sailor again? Is that what that is? That's not the worst here.
No, it's solid. And, one of the few cards that could start to pull Joe back in, but it's just with Ishkana looming, and I
Yeah,
think the only
man.
card that he could maybe activate Spectral Sailor, draw Mystical Dispute.
Okay.
It's probably what is the cleanest path out of this for
That's
Joe, but
interesting.
then, he's kind of put himself back to almost even, and then, some gas will need to come off the top there,
Yeah.
but I think there's a path.
Okay. Let's see. Joe's thinking about not playing this Sailor. Wonder if it's because of the flashback on Jace. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Oh, it is Sailor. Okay. So he sends that in. He's going to go ahead and draw a card. He's going to hope to hit. Yeah, that resolves. He says, okay, so some spiders are made. And Joe's in some trouble. Lots of trouble. Rest in peace. Way late to the party. Man, it's just Joe's been in a series where he's drawn the card he needs like just a turn late both times. Whether that so he's now hit this rest in peace. He had a spell queller previously in the game, just a little bit behind.
Yeah, super thin margins, and actually, Rest in Peace kind of showing some of the upside for main phasing that Spectral Sailor. And I don't think the Rest in Peace was the card that Joe drew, but it's one of those things where you have that, and Mystical Dispute too.
Ugh. Man.
Yeah, the line between these cards being fantastic and dead is just so thin.
So thin. Here comes that Rest in Peace. Joe's going to trigger that. Everybody's graveyard is going to be exiled here.
My kingdom for a Jace Ultimate this game.
Man.
Let's get some mill action.
It might happen. Jace Ultimate's at 8. Is that right? I think it's 8.
I suspect 9.
It might be 9.
I've actually only done that, I think, once, and I've played a lot of Jace.
I've done it several times. I just can't remember the number. It's -9. We get confirmation. All right. Ishkana, time to attack. So I was looking at Joe's sideboard too. He has these deputy detentions in there, and I wonder if this is a matchup where it comes in, because he could get Will if he has like a company into one of those plus another spirit or something, a Lord effect or something like that, because Will's down to 2.
Yeah, identifying spider tokens as one of the most likely things to beat you, I think, is super reasonable. Each individual one trades pretty close to for a full card of yours. And here we see Spectral Sailor continuing to do work, finding Spell Queller. Okay, starting to come together. I mean, if Will continues to brick.
Yeah. Hey, how much is the activation cost on Ishkana? Is it 7?
7, yeah.
Okay.
So it's available now, and that kind of gives Will the flexibility to play full court press on the defense and still have a way to kind of kill Joe down, death by 1,000 cuts here.
Okay. You see that? So we saw Ishkana get cast. It has reach of 3/5. Creates the 1/2 spiders that you see hanging out there. And then for 7 mana, target opponent loses 1 life for each spider you control, and Will controls 4 currently. We see Joe just kind of put the pedal to the metal, though, and say, all right, well, you're going to have to beat my spirits, and he's going to try and pump them up. I mean, Joe has a route to victory this game. As dire as it looked, he's got some stuff going on.
Yeah, it's age-old magic question: who would win, a horde of spiders or a 1/1 flying boy?
Wow. Is Joe going to come back and win this game? I feel like he might.
Yeah, Will's missed on 2 draw steps in a row. The board is growing for Joe, and he's about 1 other pump effect away from having kind of good trades 1-for-1 on these ones. Actually, he's kind of already there in that regard. He's going to wait 1 more turn, get an extra Spectral Sailor draw, try and find another creature to add, but
he might even go for it now, yeah. Going to go for another Sailor activation. No. He's got Nebelgast Herald, too.
Oh, yeah, Nebelgast would be that would be huge if he could find that one. Getting these spiders out of combat with 3 lethal attackers in play.
All right. Yeah, so you see Nebelgast Herald there, flash flying. Whenever it or another spirit enters the battlefield, you get to tap target creature an opponent controls, and that's pretty big. There's a Mausoleum Wanderer. Wow. All right, so we're going to drain Joe for 4, down to 10.
We might be back at the point where Will needs his second sideboard Languish to come back.
I know, man. This is crazy. I mean, Fatal Push for the Selfless Spirit. I mean, okay, he's going to sacrifice.
Yeah, it's not bad. That kind of pulls him closer to parity on the battlefield.
Draining for 4. Interesting timing on that. Any reason to do it now? You think he can line up an attack and make Joe block?
I think it's probably trying to defend himself against a spell queller draw. Otherwise you kind of run the risk of the Selfless Spirit not having to be sacrificed, and then dying becomes a lot, much more on the table.
Okay. Joe, let's see what he's got. So, let's see what Joe does here. There's a Herald hanging out. Activates the Spectral Sailor.
Wow, that second Spirit means
Is that
2
it?
taps, and I think
He's got him, I think. So Herald, Nebelgast Herald into Selfless Spirit. Taps 2 down. 2 blockers for 3 creatures. I think that's going to do it with the Supreme Phantom. Yeah, I think he's got him.
Capping a pretty wild comeback there.
So Nebelgast Herald for Joe. Going to tap Ishkana. Selfless Spirit going to tap another one. Joe's got 4 attackers for 2 blockers. Yeah, and he's got him. Wow, Joe Bernal going to pick up a W. Spectral Sailor.
Yeah, Magic's great. It's
Wow.
kind of what I take away from that game. That was full of swings. Both players had what kind of looked like command leads at various points in time. And, just really great kind of haymaker-y mid-range Magic. That was the best Spectral Sailor game I have seen.
So,
I think, full stop.
Joe has little to no respect for Spectral Sailor. He has 2 of them. He has 4 of everything else.
Yeah.
Joe, we're going to have a talk with Joe about that.
2's all you need. The first one died. The second one carries the game.
Wow, that was crazy. So, and we watched back and forth. We mentioned Will had some of his big cards like Languish, Ishkana. He had a flipped Jace at one point. He had several removal spells, whether it's Fatal Push or Abrupt Decay. And Joe able to still fight through it just with Spectral Sailor, and that was enough to do it. So
yeah, and the rest in peace was huge there too. Stopping Jace flashbacks. Uro was about to escape the turn after Ishkana. That repeated card advantage got cut. Jace just became a really kind of weak passive aura, and Ishkana solo. Yeah, not quite enough.
Wow, I'm shocked. Honestly, I really thought that Will was going to just run him down in that game. But all right, so let's talk about one of our awesome sponsors on the NRG series here in KMC. If you're looking for some sleeves, look how beautiful those look, the Hypermats. Very nice. So looking for any kind of sleeves, come to our events, hang out with us. Make sure to check them out on Facebook and Instagram as well. Facebook/KMC Sleeves. Instagram is at KMC_sleeves_USA. They got some awesome sleeves out there. The Hypermats, they got all kinds of different flavors if you're a board gamer or things like that. Need something for your, every board game has like the small sleeves. They got mini sleeves. They got all kinds of stuff for you. So be sure to check them out. Awesome sponsor of our series here. We certainly appreciate them. And if you're looking to play some Magic here, again, if you're missed today, if you're listening at home, just hanging out, tomorrow we're playing some Modern, which should be awesome. If you're looking for the 10K weekend, which is coming up soon also, we have a $5,000 team event coming up. It's going to be March 21st and 22nd, team constructed. So Pioneer, Modern, and Legacy. If you can't find 2 other friends or enemies, whatever they are, 2 random warm bodies to play with you, you can show up on Sunday to play some Pioneer like we're doing today. $5,000 trial again, and again, that's March 21st. That's next month. Not too far away, about exactly a month away. So looking forward to that one. It should be fun. Yeah,
I think team events are some of the best Magic events you can play, and especially, the NRG series continuing to offer Legacy, I think, is fantastic. There's lots of folks that I think still justifiably think it's the best constructed format. I love that one quite a bit. And, I think Pioneer's in a great spot, too. So, really looking forward to that weekend. I think I actually might be down to the trenches
all right, man.
Games. So, I think personally,
cool.
Looking forward to making it out.
Good deal. Any idea who your squad is yet?
Well, if I can drag Steve Locke back out of retirement, he's kind of always my go-to. But, it's in Wisconsin, so I might have to, settle for a Lewis Kaplan or a Sam Black.
Oh, man, unfortunate. Again, if you want to hang out with us and check out, again, deck lists and things like that, you want to watch the rounds get paired, all kinds of stuff, stay connected with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram/NRG series. You can also check out our website, nerdragegaming.com, if you're looking to buy some cards to put together. Pioneer deck, maybe a Legacy deck, whatever it is you're looking for. You can find all of our social media there on the screen. Sounds like time in the round has been called. I'm not sure if we have a backup. Do we got a backup over there? Okay, sounds like it was a really long matchup. So we're probably going to take a short break here. It looks like we just hit the time in the round, so we'll take a short break here in the booth. Sounds like we got all of our tech issues solved. Again, appreciate everybody sticking it out with us. We're going to be back in just a few minutes with round number 3, some Pioneer action here. I believe Joe and Wyatt are going to be in the booth, so we'll see you in just a few.